Hello everybody, my name is Ken Chen and I'm a researcher at the Home Team Behavioral Sciences Center. It is my pleasure to share with you the research that my team and I have been working on in the topic of the spread of fake news after a terror attack. So here are some caveats. Next, I'll be sharing with you the scope of the presentation. So first, I'll be sharing with you what we do at the Home Team Behavioral Sciences Center and introduce this topic to you. Next, I'll examine the literature behind the psychological factors that enable the spread of fake news after a terror incident. Next, I'll share with you our study that we have done concerning the spread of fake news after a terror incident in Southeast Asia and discuss the implications for research and practice. First off, a bit about ourselves at the Home Team Behavioral Sciences Center. We are a research, training and operational support center in the Ministry of Home Affairs, Singapore. Our aim is to enhance the operational effectiveness of law enforcement officers, and our research covers a wide range of subjects, from crime to threat assessment to even information operations. And how we value add to the security research and practice is we bring together a behavioral sciences perspective as well as an Asian perspective. So to start off, there are actually a few incidents which actually began sparking off our interest in examining the spread of fake news after a terror incident. So these are incidents such as the Westminster attack in 2017, Las Vegas shooting, as well as the Surabaya bombing. And we see that the spread of fake news can actually disrupt social harmony in societies after a terror incident. So for example, after the Surabaya bombing, there were conspiracies that were claiming that the attack was a ploy to tarnish the image of Islam as well as to distract the population from the upcoming 2019 presidential elections. And this actually raises a few following questions for us to answer about this area, which we sought to do in our research, which is what drives the spread of fake news after a terror incident? What kind of fake news can we expect to find after a terror incident? What kind of impact on society can we expect? What can we do about it? And how can we study this in a systematic and empirical fashion? So first off, we reviewed the literature on the psychological factors driving this phenomenon. And one of the first things we found is that high arousal emotional states actually drive the spread of fake news. Why is this so? Is that actually the threat of a terror attack actually induces high arousal emotional states such as anger and fear. And from the literature, we know that content that can evoke such emotions are likely to go viral as compared to low arousal emotions such as sadness or contentment. To illustrate my point, I will use the Westminster attack as an example. So the Westminster attack actually demonstrated that fake news can actually go viral by riding on an outrage. So for example, after the attack, there was an image of a Muslim woman on the phone that was being circulated online with a claim that she was ignoring the victims on the bridge. As a result, there was a lot of retweets as well as Islamophobic backlash by the far right, many of whom who used that image to support their rhetoric against Muslims. However, in reality, is that the picture is actually taken out of context, and there were actually other photos which showed that she was visibly distressed. Next, we examine the perception of existing in-group and out-group hostilities, which was another factor that was driving the spread of fake news after a terror incident. We find that content that tends to highlight certain attributes of the assailants, such as their race, their religion, their political affiliation, or even their ideology, after a terror attack, is a thing that happens quite frequently. One of the reasons is that it actually reinforces existing in-group and out-group hostilities in societies, and that one response that they can elicit is that people who see that their identity is under threat would tend to engage in more hostility towards the group. One example I can raise is from the Las Vegas shooting. Far-right websites such as InfoWars claim that the shooter was actually connected to Antifa or liberals. However, there is no evidence for such claims, and it actually shows that how this kind of fake news can actually be used by different parties in order to stir up tensions between different groups, for example, such as the liberals and the conservatives, so as to disseminate their messages to their own audiences. Next, we examine the role of personal networks in driving the spread of rumors. There are a few things we know from the literature is that actually the source of the message tends to be more persuasive if it's perceived to be seem to be sharing common values or experiences with the recipients, for example, such as your family or your friends. There's a couple of explanations for this, such as reducing the need for greater cognitive deliberation of the messages, and this might be able to account for why we see the spread of rumors via WhatsApp or social media. This is an example of a fake message that was widely circulated after the 2018 Surabaya bombings via text messaging, which claimed that the police were warning people to avoid certain malls. As you can see over here, these are all spread via personal networks such as WhatsApp or text messaging. And this brings us to why we wanted to study the spread of fake news after a terror attack. And one of the things we do see is that there's a lack of research in this area, especially in Southeast Asia. So to address this gap, we examine the features of fake news after a terror attack in Southeast Asia and the different kinds of social impact on the community that it has. And this presentation will be focused on our current phase 2, which is where our study is at. So in terms of methodology, we use a mix of machine learning and manual procedures. Uh, and for the purpose of this study, we define fake news and social impact as such. And we use incidents from 2015 to 2019. Next, we look at the units of analysis by looking at reported instances of fake news after a terror incident. And these instances of fake news are collected via news agencies or websites. Okay, now I'll give you an overview of our methodology. First, we identified terror attacks in Southeast Asia using the Global Terrorism Database as well as manual searches. Then next, we collected content relating to these attacks via the Google search engine as well as the fake news that can occur. And from there, we identified relevant content through the use of machine learning. And from there, we moved on to the manual verification and coding by human coders. And from there, we identified 23 incidents in Southeast Asia from 2015 to 2019. We looked at the various types of fake news after an incident, and we found those four main types, which are rumor, conspiracy theory, deflecting blame by a terror group, or the spread of propaganda by a terror group. And one of the most commonly occurring type we see is the spread of rumors. So first off, we examine rumors. These are the types of fake news where we see that the authorship is usually unknown or unverifiable and usually presents itself as a kind of warning. So for example, you can see them in stuff like rumors that there was a bomb that is going to be set off in a particular church following the Surabaya bombings. Next, I'll look at conspiracy theories. These are usually proposed alternative explanation for an attack and usually claims that there's powerful actors involved. For example, they may claim that it's actually a part of a government ploy in order to impose certain policies. Next will be deflecting blame. This is usually done by terror groups. We see that they may usually blame the other party for the casualties involved in an incident, or they may deny that they are involved in an act of atrocity, for example, the torturing or the killing of non-combatants. Or sometimes they may even justify an attack by claiming that the victims are actually combatants when the official news may say that they are not non-combatants. Finally, we see propaganda. Usually they go in three different directions. We find that they can either downplay the casualties that the terror group has suffered, or they may exaggerate the casualties that they inflicted. And in some cases, they may actually be claims of responsibility for an incident which they may not be a part of. Next thing we did is to look at the social impact of fake news on a community, and find that they can be characterized by these types: erosion of trust in authorities, engaging in identity politics, false alarms concerning public safety, as well as to spread fear and unrest. And the most commonly occurring type is actually the spread of fear and unrest. So now let's examine this in detail. First, we see that the erosion of trust in authorities are actually fake news that are aimed at undermining public's trust in the authorities. And we can see that these are claims that usually the police are involved in it or some government authorities are involved in it. Next is that they actually engage in identity politics by trying to incite racial, religious, or political groups to defend their interests from a threat. So for example, they may say that after a terror attack, this is actually done for a political reason in order to incite people to attribute a political motive to it. And this can actually affect the community social fabric after a terror attack. Next is actually false alarms concerning public safety, and this can actually affect the well-being of individuals and families. For example, this may be warnings about impending physical harm to people by claiming that there's actually the terrorists moving around in the area. And finally is the inciting of fear and unrest. This kind of fake news actually aim at inciting emotional or psychological responses among the members of the public to get them to feel afraid, anxious, or even panic. For example, they may claim that the government is enacting shoot to kill orders following a terror attack. So these are the kind of social impact that fake news can have on a community. And next, I'll talk about what we can do about it. So what can we do about it? So to be forewarned is actually to be forearmed. So by knowing what to look out for, authorities and policymakers can actually know what to prepare for. So for example, if you are aware that there's going to be rumors that will be spread after a terror incident, one of the ways you can prepare for it is by getting your crisis management teams to be ready to respond to these rumors. And next is if you know that there's going to be rumors that can spread fear or unrest, one of the things that can be done is to prepare this kind of public statements or prepare spokespersons to be able to address this kind of fear and unrest. Insights from crisis communication can help manage the social impact of fake news after a terror incident. So for example, if you're aware that there's actually going to be an information vacuum after a terror attack, which can create an environment for rumors to flourish and for fear to spread, it is important to address these information vacuums quickly. So by providing information, you can help reduce ambiguity and prevent these kind of rumors from flourishing. Next, the spread of fake news can erode trust in authorities, trigger false alarms concerning public safety, or engage in identity politics. These are the kinds of social impact that can already destabilize an already volatile situation for crisis managers. So there are a few things that can be done based on what we know from the research. Is that if, for example, if there's fake news that's aimed at eroding trust in the authorities, they should be countered. If not, the narratives of rallying the public to build resilience in the society can be actually sidetracked by claims of conspiracy theories that allege the government is engaging in wrongdoing. Additionally, fake news that can trigger false alarms concerning public safety is actually a nuisance for emergency personnel. So one of the things that can be done is to actually educate the public to check their information first before believing in it. So this is where media literacy programs can actually play an important role. And last but not least is that if you understand that there is going to be fake news that actually engage in divisive identity politics, this is important for them to be countered with narratives of solidarity. This is so that you can deny the bad actors from achieving their aims of sowing social disharmony. Before we move on, it's important to acknowledge certain limitations of this study. Firstly is that the words used in these algorithms were done in English. One of the things to note is that in Southeast Asia there are at least 8 different languages officially, and the local news are likely to be published in these languages. So if you are looking for English language versions of this local news, this is where the algorithm can pick them up. But if there are fake news that is being spread in their own languages, the algorithm may not be able to pick them up. And next is that we analyze fake news based on reports from news agencies and websites. There may be more richer sources of information such as social media posts, but they are also not included because of language reasons. More research could address this gap. And finally is that we analyze the types of fake news and the types of social impact separately. One of the things that could be interesting is to explore the interactions between these two types. To conclude, our current method of systematically collecting open source accounts of fake news incidents after a terror incident in Southeast Asia, as well as its social impact on the community, can give us quite a couple of rich exploratory insights into this phenomenon's nature. It shows, firstly, you can use a mix of machine learning and manual coding to study the spread of fake news after a terror attack in a systematic and scalable fashion. The next thing is that this is actually a very understudied area. A systematic approach can actually provide a clear picture of the phenomenon that we are trying to study. And with that, that's the end of my presentation. Please feel free to reach out to me via my work email or via LinkedIn. Here at HTBSC, we are very open to collaborations as well as people reaching out to us. And with that, I end my presentation. Thank you.